So this was an interesting investigation that was brought to our attention by students, actually at the University of Waterloo, who, going about their daily activities at the vending machine, noticed a message that came up that said facial recognition.app.exe application error, which was very concerning, obviously, that the vending machines were doing more than collecting payment for a bag of chips or a can of Coke. And so we launched an investigation pursuant to a complaint that was made to our office. And unbeknownst to the institution and the university itself, these vending machines were actually smart vending machines that, in addition to collecting payment information, were also collecting facial images through facial detection technology. So the facial images were collected and were converted into what was called low information resolution maps, from which other demographic data was also deduced, like age and gender, the dwelling time in front of the machine, the amount of attention that was paid on the screen, the distance from the cameras. And then there were other optional features that, to our knowledge, we did not find were turned on in this case, but there were other options where these machines could also detect students' moods from very happy to very sad. And facial features like a beard or a mustache, or if somebody was wearing sunglasses or glasses. So obviously, this collection of additional information was concerning, and we found was contrary to the Provincial Public Sector Privacy Act, which is known as FIPA. And so we concluded at the end of our investigation that this collection was unlawful, and the university, to its credit, had ended stopped the machines, took them away, and right away, upon learning about this facial detection technology. But what we found is, had they had proper due diligence in the course of their procurement practice, when they were conducting an RFP for these vending machines, they would have probably twigged on to the fact that there was technology behind them, smart technology, that should have prompted the university to conduct a privacy impact assessment, and then, of course, unpack all of these features, which would have given them the choice, the option to say, no, you can't do this, or we prefer to go with another vendor, thank you very much. Because if we're not allowed to do it under the law, then certainly no third-party vendor that we enter into a contract with can do it either. So that was really the lesson learned from this investigation was, despite best intentions and sometimes unbeknownst to the institution itself, there could be these technologies in the background, in the dark, so to speak, which really undermine students' trust or public trust more generally. And so that's why procurement process is really important, and the due diligence from beginning to end of that entire process, from planning stage to tendering to vendor selection to negotiation of contract terms, agreement management, right up to and including termination of contract is a really important process. And of course, we have guidance on that for public institutions. And so one of our strong recommendations to the institution, university, going forward was to follow that guidance in the future, so that similar oversights won't happen again.
How would you allow for these machines to still operate in your business?
Well, that's a good question. In this case, we were not dealing with a business. We're dealing with a public institution. And under the law, the public institutions in Ontario have limitations on what personal information they can collect. They can only do it for a lawfully authorized activity, and then only what's necessary for that lawfully authorized activity. So in this case, I mean, certainly universities are allowed to have cafeteria services and vending machines and to provide for food for its students on campus, and to collect payment information to pay for those services. But they were not lawfully authorized to go beyond that and collect all of this additional information, which was not necessary for the purpose of buying a can of Coke or a bag of chips. And that's where the law really draws the line in Ontario for public institutions.
Is there more that can really be done when the Privacy Act is kind of broken?
Well, there's good news on that front, Colton. First of all, in this case, the students should be very proud that they brought this issue to our attention. So thank you to the students of Waterloo. And thanks to them, the machines were removed right away. And this practice has been stopped. So first of all, that's the good news of the story. We didn't have to bend the university's arm. They had already reacted immediately. So that's number one. Number two, we carried out this investigation under the law today, as it exists, or as it existed at the time of the investigation, which only gave us recommendation making power. But why your question is such a good one is, as of July 1st, so just 2 weeks away, the Act is undergoing major changes. There are provisions that will come into force that will allow my office to conduct investigations with quite extensive investigative powers and the power to issue binding orders, including to order institutions to stop certain practice or to change their practice or to modify and so this is just really one of the last investigations under our recommendation making power, and going forward we'll be able to use those stronger enforcement powers in the future. Luckily, when you're dealing with public institutions, you don't often have to get there to binding orders, because they have every interest in complying with your recommendations to preserve, as I said, the public trust and the trust of their students or whoever they're serving, the citizens they serve. So usually we get very good cooperation, but to the students' concern, there will always, from now on, there will always be that backstop of enforcement orders, binding orders, to really change a practice or cease a practice when we need to. Technologies are becoming more and more sophisticated, and in cases where they are lawful, lawfully authorized, institutions, to your earlier question, have an obligation to notify the students in this case, or the public or citizens or users of government services, of these collection practices and of these technologies. So there is a positive obligation on institutions to provide public notice of what they're doing and explain the information practice and provide information if people want to find out more, or want more details or have questions. And so that's all set out in the law as well. And that's an important step. In this case, they never notified because they never even knew that this was happening in the background, which was the bigger problem.
Could a public institution have one of these vending machines and just notify everyone that it's happening? Or would it still not be allowed because it's a public institution?
I think that in this particular scenario of over collection beyond
Yeah,
what's necessary, in our view, that was not lawful collection, and certainly was not necessary for the purpose of providing, as I said, providing for snacks on campus. So
would a private business be allowed to do it?
Well, that's interesting because in this case, we looked at the institution, the
Yeah,
university in this case. We did not investigate the vending machine manufacturer or the provider, the supplier. That those commercial activities fall under the jurisdiction of the federal commissioner
okay, okay.
because those are commercial activities. And so that's a good question to ask my federal colleague.